Picture two government IT departments, both in Europe, both working on something huge right now. One of them just quietly finished moving 30,000 government employees off Windows and onto Linux, and nobody noticed. The other one stood in front of cameras, announced they'd built the most secure app in the world, and got humiliated by a security researcher in under 2 minutes. Same continent, same year, two completely opposite outcomes. And by the end of this video, you'll understand exactly why one worked and the other one didn't. Let's start in the north of Germany, in a state most people outside the country couldn't point to on a map, Schleswig-Holstein. It sits up between the North Sea and the Baltic. And until recently, it was about as unremarkable tech-wise as any regional government gets. That's changed. Right now, this state is in the middle of ripping Microsoft out of its entire administration. Courts, police stations, ministries, the works, and replacing it with Linux and open source software. Not a pilot, not a trial run on 50 machines in one office. The whole thing, 30,000 workstations. And here's the part that should make you sit up. It's actually working. Before we get into the how, we need to talk about the why, because the reasoning behind this goes a lot deeper than Microsoft is expensive. Yes, the money matters, and we'll get to some genuinely staggering numbers in a minute, but the real driver here is a concept the German government has started referring to as digital sovereignty, and once you understand what that phrase actually means in practice, it's hard to unsee. Think about what runs through a government's IT systems every single day. Every court document, every police report, every internal memo between departments. Now ask yourself, whose software is that running on? Whose servers? Whose code that you've never seen and have no legal right to inspect or modify? For most Western governments, the answer is a handful of American tech companies. And that answer comes with a very uncomfortable follow-up question. If that company decides to double their licensing fees next year, what do? You pay. You have no leverage because your entire infrastructure is built on their foundation, and walking away means tearing the whole thing down and starting over. Dirk Schroeder, the minister overseeing this transformation, has compared it directly to Europe's energy crisis after Russia invaded Ukraine. Suddenly, the whole continent understood, in a very painful way, what it means to be dependent on someone else for something you can't function without. Schroeder's argument is that software infrastructure carries the exact same risk, and there's a specific legal wrinkle that makes this even more pointed for Germany. Under the U.S. Cloud Act, American authorities can, in certain circumstances, request access to data held by U.S. companies, even when that data is physically stored inside the European Union, and even when the company is fully compliant with GDPR. Which means, in theory, a German judge's case files or a German police investigation could be technically reachable by a foreign government, no matter how carefully that judge or that officer followed every rule on the books. Once that idea sank in, the debate in Schleswig-Holstein was essentially over. So what does actually walking away from Microsoft look like when you're running an entire state government? It looks brutal, honestly. In October 2025, the state finished migrating over 40,000 mailboxes and more than 100 million emails and calendar entries off Microsoft's servers, a project that took 6 months and touched roughly 30,000 employees across the Chancellery, the ministries, the judiciary, and the state police. SharePoint got replaced with Nextcloud. Teams and WebEx got replaced with open-source video conferencing tools like Jitsi, with more on the way. Outlook was swapped for Thunderbird, running on an open email platform called OpenXChange. And as of December 2025, roughly 80% of desktops across the administration had already moved to LibreOffice, with the remaining 20% still tied to Word or Excel because of specialized software dependencies that need to be untangled first. Now let's talk numbers, because this is where the story stops being ideological and starts being undeniable. Schroeder has stated publicly that the state is saving around $15 million every single year just by cutting Microsoft licensing fees. Not one-time savings, recurring annual savings. There's also a one-time investment of about $9 million approved for 2026 to finish the migration and keep developing the open-source tools they're now relying on. And here's the bigger picture, that $15 million a year isn't disappearing into a foreign company's revenue report anymore. It's staying inside the German economy, funding local developers and local infrastructure. There's actual research behind this pattern too. A 2021 European Commission study found that a 10% increase in open source investment across the EU could generate roughly 600 new startups and add about 0.6% to GDP growth. This isn't just a principled stand, it's an economic strategy with numbers to back it. But before anyone gets too excited, we need to be honest about something uncomfortable. Germany has tried this before and it went badly. If you've spent any time around the Linux community, you already know the name Munich, and you probably wince a little hearing it. Back in 2004, the city of Munich launched a project called LiMux to move its desktops from Windows to Linux. By 2012, they'd converted more than 2,600 of their 15E500 machines. For years, this was the poster child of government open source adoption, proof that it could actually be done at scale. And then in 2017, the City Council voted to reverse the entire migration and go back to Microsoft. The cost of switching back? Nearly $50 million just to undo what they'd already built. What makes Munich's story so frustrating is that the people who actually built LiMux insist, to this day, that there was never a real technical reason to abandon it. Karl-Heinz Schneider, the man who led the project, has flatly called the reversal a political decision, not a technical one. And when you look at the politics, it gets murky fast. Back in 2003, Microsoft's then CEO Steve Ballmer personally flew to Munich to offer city officials a 90% discount to stay on Microsoft. A remarkable move for one of the world's largest companies to make over a single city's IT contract. Then, in 2014, Munich elected a new mayor who had publicly called himself a Microsoft fan before he even took office. He commissioned an outside firm to evaluate whether the city should keep Linux, and that firm happened to be a Microsoft partner company, based in the same building as Microsoft's German headquarters. The company hired to judge Linux's future was one that stood to profit from Linux being abandoned. So the obvious question is, why should Schleswig-Holstein turn out any differently? Honestly, it might not. But there are real structural reasons to think this attempt has better footing. For one, this wasn't a snap decision made by an enthusiastic council on a Tuesday afternoon. The state's open source push has been building for roughly 5 years, led first by the IT department, with the political backing following afterward rather than driving it. The state's CIO has described it as something that started as a technical project and only later became a political one, which is essentially the opposite order of what happened in Munich. Second, Schleswig-Holstein isn't doing this in isolation. According to Schrader, the project has drawn direct interest from Denmark, the UK, France, Switzerland, Austria, New Zealand, and India. When countries on opposite sides of the planet start studying one German state's IT department, you're no longer looking at a local political experiment. And it's not an isolated case in Europe either. France's national police force began shifting to Linux back in 2004 and had switched 37,000 desktops over by 2013, saving millions in licensing costs while gaining more control over their own systems. They even built their own customized Linux distribution for law enforcement use, based on Ubuntu, called Genbuntu. That's not a workaround. That's genuine technical independence. Italy's Ministry of Defense has replaced Microsoft Office with LibreOffice on 5,000 machines as part of a wider shift toward open platforms. And at the EU level, the Interoperable Europe Act, which came into force in 2024, is expected to push open source adoption even further across the entire bloc. The direction of travel is clear. This isn't a fringe idea anymore. It's becoming the expectation. Now let's cross over to the other story, because this one is much harder to feel good about. Every major Western government right now is racing to figure out how to stop kids from accessing harmful content online, and the intention behind that is completely reasonable. Nobody's arguing children should have unrestricted access to adult content. France's courts have ordered porn sites to verify user ages. Australia has banned under 16s from social media entirely. The UK's Online Safety Act is now in force, requiring age verification from platforms ranging from Reddit and Discord to Spotify and adult content sites with serious fines for noncompliance. And in the UK's case specifically, verification typically means uploading a government ID or submitting to facial recognition, biometric data that's classified as special category data under UK GDPR. So every adult who wants to use these platforms legally is now expected to hand a passport scan or a face scan to a third-party company just to prove they're old enough to be there. That should already make you a little uneasy, and privacy advocates have been saying so loudly. The concern isn't hypothetical either. In October 2025, a breach at a third-party vendor connected to Discord exposed roughly 70,000 government ID photos. Real people who'd uploaded their most sensitive documents just to verify their age, stolen not by some elite hacking operation, but through a vendor most of them had never even heard of. As one researcher from the Electronic Frontier Foundation put it, the solution being proposed is to hand even more of our most sensitive data over to companies we've already said we don't trust. It's a contradiction that doesn't hold together under any scrutiny. And then there's the European Commission's attempt to do this better. Determined to avoid the UK's approach, the Commission set out to build something privacy-preserving, open source, transparent, designed so users could prove their age without handing over personal data to the platforms themselves. On April 15, 2026, Commission President Ursula von der Leyen stood up and declared the app technically ready, calling it aligned with the highest privacy standards in the world. The very next day, a security consultant named Paul Moore opened up the app's publicly available source code on GitHub. It took him under 2 minutes to find that the app was storing sensitive biometric data and photos completely unencrypted on the device. 2 minutes to unravel a system the Commission had just told the entire continent was airtight. Moore went further and found that a poorly secured PIN system meant someone could simply delete a few configuration files, restart the app, and gain access to another person's verified identity. No advanced hacking required, just a basic tutorial in about 20 minutes. As Moore himself pointed out, this is something a motivated teenager could pull off. The app, built specifically to stop teenagers from bypassing age restrictions, could be defeated by a teenager with a search engine. The Commission scrambled to patch it, releasing an update just 2 days later. Moore tested that version too, and found the fix relied on 3 security components that were already deprecated. Outdated, unsupported tools, deliberately added after the public backlash as a supposed hardening measure. His verdict was blunt: security theater. Here's what makes this so much bigger than one buggy app. This age verification system isn't a standalone product. It's explicitly designed as the foundation for the European Digital Identity Wallet, a system meant to roll out across all 27 EU member states by the end of 2026, covering roughly 450 million people. The Commission has stated outright that the age verification app shares its technical specifications with the Digital Identity Wallet to ensure future compatibility. In other words, this flawed app wasn't just a side project, it was the test run for the identity infrastructure of an entire continent. Belgian cryptographer Bart Preneel, one of over 400 scientists who've publicly called for a halt to mandatory age verification schemes like this one, made a point that cuts deeper than any single security flaw. Bugs can be patched, he said, and once they are, people assume the problem is solved. But the real danger is rolling out a system whose fundamental design doesn't work. And once that infrastructure exists, expanding its use requires nothing more than a policy decision. No rebuild needed. The pipes are already laid. Someone just has to turn the valve. And history shows again and again that when the valve exists, eventually someone turns it. Put these 2 stories side by side and the lesson becomes obvious. Schleswig-Holstein asked the hard questions first. Who controls this data? Who can see it? Who can change the terms? And when the answers were uncomfortable, they spent years methodically building something better, even knowing it would be painful and expensive along the way. The European Commission did the opposite. They announced success before the foundation was solid and got caught within 24 hours. Both projects are open source, which is worth sitting with for a second. The age verification app's flaw was found precisely because the code was public. Transparency did exactly what it's supposed to do. The failure wasn't openness. The failure was declaring victory before the work was actually finished. Neither story is over. Schleswig-Holstein may yet face its own political reversal, the way Munich did. The EU's app might eventually get rebuilt into something genuinely sound. But right now, today, one small German state between 2 seas is quietly proving that digital independence from big tech is achievable at real scale. 30,000 employees, 100 million emails, tens of millions of euros saved every year. And on the same continent, one of the most powerful institutions in the world called a broken app the gold standard in privacy, and was proven wrong before the press conference had even ended. Technology doesn't care about press releases. A system is either secure or it isn't. And the gap between institutions that understand that and institutions that don't is only getting more obvious.